Well, before we start looking at predictive analytics, let's take a look at Spark. Spark is designed as a high-performance, general-purpose computation engine, and it works by distributing its workload across different nodes in a cluster. In other words, it scales out to enable it to process large volumes of data. So it's great for big data batch processing, and it's also really good for low latency, high performance, interactive analytics of data. Now, the way that you work with data in Spark traditionally is using something called an RDD, a resilient distributed data set. And that's the kind of basic unit of data that we work with within Spark. It's a kind of core programming model for working with data and has been there since the beginning. And to work with those RDDs, there are APIs for lots of different languages. So whether you're programming in Java or Scala or Python or other languages like R, you can work with RDDs. However, as things have moved on, we find that working with RDDs perhaps can be a little complex and they're perhaps not the most intuitive structures to work with. So more and more frequently, we're finding that we're working with data frames. These are a slightly more high-level abstraction of the data, and they provide us with a schema that we can work against, and we can separate out the fields and columns in that data set and work with them more intuitively. So we'll be predominantly focusing on data frames in this course. And again, there are APIs for working with data frames in all the different languages that are supported by Spark. So when we write code to work with these data frames, what are we going to use? Well, there are a whole bunch of tools that you can use with Spark. We're going to focus on using something called notebooks, and specifically Jupyter Notebooks. The Jupyter Notebooks is provided as a service with the Azure HD Insight deployment of Spark. So you can just open up a browser. Within that browser, you can use Jupyter to create a notebook, and then you can use that notebook to write code or to enter comments and text and collaborate with other people. Now, Jupyter Notebooks support a number of different kernels or engines at the back end. So you can use a Jupyter Notebook to run code in Python or Scala. Now, when you run that code, you're going to enter the code into a cell. So you might write some code to load a data frame. And then you can also use functionality within that notebook to go and query that data frame and interactively display information within the notebook. You can even actually visualize the data in there. It's a very flexible, powerful way to work with our data in our Spark cluster. And that's what we're going to use for the practical experiences that you're going to have in this course. So I hope you're ready to move on and start looking now at how we can get ourselves working with Spark. And once we're set up to do that, we'll start talking about how we can do predictive analytics using Spark.